Every tourist who visits Versailles sees the same thing. 17 arched windows, 357 mirrors, light fracturing across a floor so polished it looks like water. They smell orange blossoms. They hear their own footsteps echo. They take a photograph and they leave believing they have seen Versailles. They haven't. 4 feet behind the wall of mirrors, right now, as you watch this, there is a passage. No windows, no decoration. Ceiling so low you duck your head. The plaster is water-stained and the floor is sticky with something nobody has cleaned. The smell hits you like a wall. Human waste, rotting food, tallow smoke, unwashed bodies, and beneath it all, perfume. Overwhelming, aggressive, almost medicinal perfume that isn't covering the smell. It's competing with it. This video walks through the second Versailles, the one they built to be invisible, the one that made the first one possible. To understand what went wrong at Versailles, you need to understand why it was built. Louis XIV moved his entire court here permanently in 1682. 10,000 people, not a visit, a permanent relocation. And the reason has nothing to do with architecture or gardens or the view across the Grand Canal. It has to do with a night in 1651 when Louis was 10 years old, and a mob forced him to flee Paris in the dark. The Fronde, a series of civil wars led by French nobles, had nearly destroyed the monarchy. Aristocrats with their own armies, their own fortresses, their own regional power bases were ungovernable. Louis remembered every moment. He spent the next 30 years building a solution. The solution was Versailles. You cannot rebel from inside a palace. You cannot raise an army when you are competing every morning for the privilege of handing the king his shirt. You cannot threaten a throne when your entire existence, your rank, your income, your reputation, depends on how close you stand to one man's body during his morning walk to mass. Versailles is a trap, the most beautiful trap in human history, and 10,000 people moved into it willingly. The problem is that nobody designed it to actually house 10,000 people. 2,300 rooms, 10,000 residents. The mathematics of Versailles do not work from the beginning. At the top, the highest princes receive proper apartments, high ceilings, fireplaces that function, perhaps a window facing the gardens. A room designed for one duke now houses 3 families separated by cloth screens and hastily nailed partitions. 1 fireplace, 1 door, 3 households pretending not to hear each other. Drop lower in the hierarchy and the space compresses further. A minor nobleman might occupy a single attic room, 7-foot ceiling, no window, no heat in winter, no escape from the heat in summer. He shares 1 hallway privy with 40 others. He considers himself fortunate to have the room at all. Below him, the servants do not have rooms. They sleep on straw in the service corridors, in storage closets, across the kitchen threshold where at least the ovens keep them warm. Chambermaids fold themselves into corners of passages. Valets hang curtains across alcoves to claim 12 square feet of privacy. Important, this is not a system breaking down. This is the system working exactly as it was designed. Because at Versailles, a cramped attic room inside the palace carries more power than a 50-room estate 1 day's ride away. The estate puts you nowhere. The attic room puts you 10 minutes from the king's morning walk. So they compete for the attic room. They beg for it. They pay for it. And 10,000 people live in a building designed for perhaps 3,000 because nobody with the power to change it wants to leave. Versailles in 1682 has approximately 24 functional toilets for 10,000 residents. 24. The rest of the palace runs entirely on chamber pots. Every morning, a courtier uses the pot beside his bed. A servant collects it, sometimes immediately, sometimes hours later. She carries it through the service passage, turns sideways to let a valet pass, presses herself against the wall when a courier rushes through. The pot sloshes. Something leaks at the seal. She doesn't stop. She empties it into a courtyard cesspit and returns to her other duties. Now multiply that scene by several thousand. Every morning, every night, every hour of every day that 10,000 people produce waste inside a building with almost no drainage infrastructure. The corridors absorb it. Stone floors develop stains that do not wash out. Walls at waist height show permanent discoloration where pots have brushed against the plaster for years. The smell becomes part of the architecture itself. And when no servant is near, courtiers do not wait. Stairwells become impromptu latrines. Alcoves behind tapestries. The poorly lit corner of a corridor that sees less traffic. Nobody discusses which passages to avoid. Nobody needs to. Everyone knows. The gardens offer no escape. Certain hedgerow groves become understood as outdoor privies. The ground stays soft and foul-smelling in sections the king never walks through. Le Nôtre's geometric perfection holds only in the paths Louis actually uses. Everywhere else, 10,000 residents treat the landscape as an extension of a sanitation system that has already failed. Then the rats arrive. They are never not there. They own the kitchens, warmth, food scraps, dark storage cellars. But they move through the whole palace. One account records a rat crossing a noblewoman's bed in an attic apartment at night. They scratch inside the walls. That sound becomes part of the palace's permanent background noise, like distant music, like someone always moving in the dark. This is what the perfume is for. Here is what no history textbook says plainly. Almost every piece of iconic Versailles fashion is a direct response to a specific sanitation problem. The perfume. A courtier preparing for the day applies scent the way a soldier checks weapons. Musk oil at the wrists and throat, powdered iris root through the wig, gloves soaked overnight in jasmine water, a pomander at the waist releasing cloves and ambergris with every step. The goal is not to smell pleasant. The goal is saturation, to build a personal atmosphere strong enough to overpower everything in the corridors outside. This is why Versailles perfumes hit like a fist. Modern fragrances are engineered for slow release over hours. These were designed to compete right now with 100 unwashed bodies and urine-soaked stone floors and the cesspit smell rising from the courtyard below. A delicate floral note would vanish in seconds. Grasse, a town in Provence, converts its tanneries to perfume workshops to meet the demand. The connection is not coincidental. Tanneries already work with the animal musks perfumers need. Civet extracted from the glands of civet cats. Castoreum from beavers. Deer musk, the heaviest, most persistent base materials available. Versailles orders perfume by the case. The wigs. Lice are endemic at Versailles. Washing hair is considered medically dangerous, believed to open the pores of the scalp to disease. So courtiers wash their actual hair perhaps once a month. The towering wigs, some rising 2 feet above the scalp, cover this. More practically, the wig can be removed, combed, heavily powdered with scented starch, and replaced. Your own hair remains largely untouched and out of sight. The wide skirts. Women's skirts expand to extraordinary volumes, supported by internal hoops. The silhouette is what survives in paintings. The function is less discussed. The volume creates distance between your body and others in a crowded corridor. And when no chamber pot is available and no alcove offers cover, the skirt provides it. A woman can relieve herself standing in a hallway if her dress is wide enough. Nobody designed this feature officially, but fashion made it possible, and fashion was everywhere. The heeled shoes, men's shoes with 3-inch heels, keep the wearer elevated above whatever is on the corridor floor. They signal wealth and status. You do not do physical labor in these shoes. They also keep your feet dry when the passage stone is wet with something you would rather not identify. The impracticality is the point, and so is the elevation. The strangest thing about all of this is that nobody complained. Not officially, not on record. Foreign visitors did, ambassadors who wrote home in disbelief at what they were smelling. But courtiers, the people who lived inside it, said almost nothing. Because acknowledging the reality, wrinkling your nose at the corridor smell, showing discomfort when stepping over a puddle of something unidentifiable, was a failure of composure. And at Versailles, composure was the only currency that mattered. A duke steps over pooled urine without glancing down. A countess navigates around a servant emptying a chamber pot without breaking her sentence. They discuss philosophy and art standing 3 feet from a pile of waste that no one has cleaned. And the skill being demonstrated is the ability to pretend it is not there. The more chaotic the reality underneath, the more rigid the performance above it. The etiquette, the exact depth of the curtsy, the precise order of entry into a room, these are not empty formalities. They are the only stable thing in an environment where nothing else is controllable. Louis XIV sets the example personally. He does not bathe. He is wiped down daily with cloths soaked in rosewater and spirits. He changes his linen shirt several times a day. He moves through the palace as if the hidden corridors do not exist, as if the smell does not exist, as if the only Versailles is the one in the paintings. His courtiers follow his lead. They perform harder. Louis could have fixed it. Sewers existed. Drainage infrastructure existed. Other European palaces had better sanitation, but building sewers at Versailles would have meant admitting that the divine king's palace, heaven made physical, the sun made architecture, functioned like a failing medieval city. He could not admit that, so nobody fixed anything. The chamber pots kept traveling the corridors. The cesspits kept overflowing. The rats kept scratching in the walls. The Hall of Mirrors still stands. Tourists photograph it every day. The service corridors still stand too. Narrow, dark, their walls still faintly stained. Most visitors never find them. Nobody knew that the most powerful court in the world was drowning in its own filth and choosing deliberately not to notice. Nobody knew that every bottle of perfume was an admission of failure dressed as luxury. Nobody knew that behind every mirror, 4 feet of plaster away, was the reality that the spectacle existed to hide. absolute power, when it chooses performance over reality, rots from the inside out. Versailles lasted 107 years before the people outside the gates stopped pretending along with it.